A sad but hopeful drama. On the 29th of February 2013, 15-year-old joebell took his own life after being mercifully bullied for being gay. It's an all too familiar story as, over the years, many LGBTQ young people have killed themselves after being subjected to homophobic physical and verbal attacks. In many cases, their schools failed to protect them from the bullying they endured, and, according to the film at least, this was the case for Jaden, who didn't get the help he needed when he was threatened by some of his classmates. Sadly, we live in a society where homophobia still runs rampant. Parents refuse to accept the sexuality of their children, schools fail to take seriously the bullying that takes place, and groups of narrow-minded individuals try to use conversion therapy to turn gay people straight. Thankfully, there is greater tolerance and understanding from some, but life still isn't easy for those who profess to be gay or transgender. Joebell is a film that might resonate with you if you have ever been affected by homophobia or the suicide of somebody close to you. It tells the tale of Joe, the grieving father of Jaden, who decided to walk across the United States to spread awareness about teen bullying to any school or community group that would give him the platform to share his experiences. His is an inspirational story as rather than let grief overwhelm him into silence, he took action instead, turning a tragic event into something that could potentially save the lives of others. I had never heard of Joe or Jaden before watching this film, but after viewing it, I am glad I was able to experience their story, despite the crushing heartbreak I felt during and after the film. As played by Mark Wahlberg, the character of Joe is an interesting one. He is not particularly likable, at least initially, partly due to his gruff persona and heated temperament. However, it is clear that he loves Jaden and mercifully doesn't treat his son like a second-class citizen because of his sexuality. As Joe journeys to New York on his personal crusade, he is sometimes joined by the imagined persona of Jaden. I don't know if this is a reflection of what the real-life Joe experienced on his travels, or whether Jaden's ghostly presence is merely a plot device for the film, but whatever the case, the back and forth between the two gives us an insight into the struggles Joe sometimes had to convey his message effectively. As he progresses further, he manages to gain courage in the things he needs to say, and this is highlighted by the imagined Jaden smiling in recognition at his father's efforts to be more open about himself and the experiences his son went through. Wahlberg is excellent as Joe, and relative newcomer Reed Miller is equally as good as Jaden, giving an emotionally raw performance that manages to draw us into the pain that Jaden experienced. While the film sometimes focuses on other members of the family and the people that Joe encounters during his travels, it always brings us back into the father-son relationship, be that through flashbacks to the time before Jaden's death or the roadside conversations that Joe has with his dead son on his journey. The film is directed in a low-key style by Ronaldo Marcus Green, the director of the recent King Richard, and it avoids sentimentality and audience manipulation. It manages to evoke tears by telling the story of Jaden and Joe without a lot of emotional melodrama, but it sometimes skips over scenes that could have made the film more powerful. We never get to see Joe's reaction to the news that his son has died, for example, and we rarely get to hear a lot of Joe's testimony when he is sharing his experiences with others. It's as if the director and screenwriters have purposefully avoided certain moments to avoid tugging too heavily on our heartstrings, perhaps to avoid criticism from hardened movie reviewers. However, this is a film that demanded a few more scenes of emotional anguish to fully showcase the fallout of Jaden's death and the effect it had on those around him. This isn't to say there aren't scenes of high emotion. The scene when Jaden's mother, Connie Britton, finds out her son is dead is devastating, but in most cases, the film is surprisingly muted during times when other directors may have focused more heavily on the heartbreak of those involved in the tragedy. Still, this isn't necessarily a criticism, but more of an observation from somebody who has experience of the devastating effects of suicide and the bullying that continues to take place within the LGBTQ community. And besides, the film, for the most part, manages to put across its message without overplaying the emotional card, a little like Joe himself in this regard, so it can be heavily faulted. This is a good film that demands to be watched by as many people as possible. After a delayed release, this is now possible, in the UK at least, as Amazon Prime have included it on their streaming service. I hope its message of tolerance hits home with those who have bullied or judged others for being different, and I hope it encourages those parents who do have LGBTQ children to be more accepting and supportive. For those who are currently struggling with life as a gay or transgender person, I also hope the film encourages them to speak up about the issues they may be having at school or elsewhere. If we can all be more open and loving towards one another, there will be far fewer teen suicides this or any other year. I recommend the film then, even if it isn't the emotional powerhouse that it could have been. The story of Jaden Bell is one that deserves to be told, as do the stories of young people who have shared his experiences. It's a sad film to be sure, and there are shocks in store outside of Jaden's death. But it's also a hopeful film in that it recognizes the efforts of Joe and people like him to spread awareness about a very real issue that is still affecting many young people today. Watch it, be moved, and then do something rather than nothing to care for the people in your life that may be hurting right now. Joe Bell tells the true story of a father who walked across America to raise awareness about teen bullying and suicide. It is a sad but hopeful story, anchored by an excellent performance by Mark Wahlberg as Joe, and an equally brilliant performance from relative newcomer Reed Miller, who plays Jaden, Joe's 15-year-old son. The movie is heartbreaking, not least because of the reasons behind Joe's decision to embark on a personal crusade. Sadly, events take a tragic turn at the conclusion of this emotional drama, so viewers should prepare themselves for a shock if they don't already know what happened to Joe. Why did Joe decide to walk across America? On the 29th of February 2013, 15-year-old Jaden Book took his own life after being bullied and ridiculed by his classmates. Jaden was openly gay, and this was the reason why he became the victim of physical and verbal abuse by his peers. According to the movie, the school did little to support him, and so, feeling vulnerable and alone, he decided to hang himself. Not wanting Jaden's death to be in vain, Joe decided to honor his late son's memory by walking across America and visiting schools and community groups to raise awareness about the effects of bullying. He planned to walk the 3,985-mile journey from La Grande to New York City. He chose New York because this was the place Jaden dreamed of moving to after leaving school. Did Joe journey alone? For most of his journey, Joe walked alone, although, in the film at least, he sometimes had conversations with the imagined version of Jaden. However, there were also moments when Joe was joined by the people who wanted to support his message and mission. After hearing about what Joe was doing, they traveled to find the grieving father to offer food, shelter, and plenty of friendly encouragement. One such person was the sheriff of Lincoln County, played by Gary Sinise, another father of a gay son, who was able to offer Joe comfort and company. Does Joe complete his journey? Joe traveled across America for 6 months, spreading awareness about teen bullying and LGBTQ youth to anybody who would give him the platform to share his message. He had planned to journey for 2 years before returning home, but as the film draws to an end, another tragedy occurs. When walking across a 2-lane highway in eastern Colorado, Joe was struck and killed by a tractor trailer. According to police reports, the driver of the vehicle had fallen asleep at the wheel before hitting Joe. News of his death came as a shock to all who knew him, including the sheriff who had met with Joe the day before his passing. Joe's death was heartbreaking, and it's a shocking conclusion to a film that is already steeped in tragedy. But as Joe made sure his son didn't die in vain, others have made sure that Joe didn't die in vain either. What happened after Joe's death? After Jaden died, his friends and family started the anti-bullying organization, Faces for Change. As Joe embarked on his walk, donations were made to the organization to support Joe's mission, and years after his death, the group still exists today. Check out their Facebook page to learn more. Through the work of Joe and the people who have since taken the baton and shared his message, many schools have adopted anti-bullying policies and support systems for LGBTQ students. As Joe wanted schools to provide suicide prevention training to their counselors, it is good to know that this eventually came about, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Joe's death was undeniably a tragic one, as was the death of Jaden. Today, suicide is still the leading cause of death among young people, especially those who identify themselves as being gay and/or transgender. According to the Trevor Project, at least one LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 and 24 attempts suicide every 45 seconds in the US. This is a shocking statistic, and it shows there is still a lot of work to be done. However, thanks to Joe's message of awareness and the work of Faces for Change and organizations like them, there is hope. Those who are considering suicide have more people and places to turn to due to the systems that have been put in place in schools and beyond. What can you do to help after seeing the movie? If you know somebody who is struggling with suicidal thoughts, be that because of the bullying they have received or for some other reason, you can offer your support to them. You can also donate to those groups that seek to prevent teen suicide. And if you are somebody that is experiencing bullying, whether that's because of your sexuality or not, it's important to know that you aren't alone. Seek support from any helpful party at your school, talk to your family if you can, and search online for any group that can help you. Thanks for listening. Ending Explained. What did you think of the ending? Have we missed anything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments box.